Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today in Clash Royale. What do you think of the new overlay and branding, guys? Huge shout out to Radical Rosh for making it. I'm a huge fan. It's animated, it's got a lot going on, but it's also fun. And I'm up here, I'm not down there anymore. So hope you guys enjoy it. Let me know what your feedback is in the comments below. Today I have on, it's funny, in yesterday's video I talked to you guys about, I was at King's Cup and I got so many requests for two specific guests, and I'm bringing them to you guys back to back. Yesterday was Rumham, today is Tag. Jake, Tag, how you doing, man?
Hey, what's up, man? How's it been?
I've been really well, super busy, as I know you have too, but, still recovering the vocal cords from King's Cup 2. What do you think of the event? You did so well, dominating in the the entry phase. What was the experience like for you? I know you mentioned to me off air that you plan on making a video just talking about this, but maybe a little sneak peek.
Yeah, so the experience for me was just phenomenal overall. Not only did I get to compete and play well, I got to meet everyone that I've been talking to for so many years. It's pretty nice to put a face to everyone and just be able to talk to them and chill and know who you're actually practicing with.
Yeah, man, it must have been so cool, like you said, to finally get your first event. And there were so many pros there. It was crazy, right? There was it felt like half the audience, if not more, was contracted pro players.
Yeah, a fun fact is actually two of the players that ended up qualifying are actually two of the players in the entire top 20. Only two of them were not contracted. So
Unbelievable, right? Yugi and Vulcan, I guess?
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So honestly,
Crazy.
the event wasn't as accessible as everyone thought because all the pro players ended up getting all the way to the end, even though it was called Joe's.
That's fair. That's
For the
fair.
final eight slot, everyone there was phenomenal. Everyone in that top 20 could beat anyone in this game at any given day. The level of play was amazing. People were traveling from 20 hours far away, all the way from China, Hong Kong. I was really in shock to see all the TMD guys there.
Yeah,
Crazy, man.
man. Yeah, they represent, and they're fun. Everybody's a good person. Even people who you're not sure about, when you meet them in person, oftentimes if you have a history, it's forgotten. And that's why I love live events, because you really get to know people on a face-to-face level. So, and it was awesome to meet you. I'll include a picture of Sir Tag and I on the on the overlay for you guys right now. But it was awesome to finally meet you too. And you actually played this deck that we're going to be highlighting today throughout a lot of the tournament. This is one of your main two go-to decks, right?
Yeah, so this deck right now is probably one of the most solid decks playing against other high-level players, especially because throughout the tournament, a lot of the players were rocking either log bait, they're running Three Musketeers, which is one of the strongest decks in the entire meta at the moment, and then on top of that, they're running Pump Expo to counter a whole bunch of the log bait. So what I figured is the Pump Expo doesn't actually have a spell, so if I put in a whole bunch of minions and run Giant Miner, it's gonna wreck them. Three Musketeers gets obliterated, and it allows me to go and just get on to the next game a lot faster in a 1 hour tournament. If you get fast wins, 3 crown people, you're gonna get on to the next game, not have to play as many games, and it's just gonna be very advantageous for you. I put in log and I switched out log and zap depending on how many people were playing log bait during the in-game tournaments, and it just worked out really well for me. A few times when I was trying to get a log bait player or a Three Musketeer player, I even ended up getting against hard counters. I think Ace ended up running a balloon P.E.K.K.A deck, and if you play it perfectly and they make one misplay, you can still win. And I ended up going undefeated in the final bracket, and it's just a testament to how strong this deck is, even against hard matchups, against very strong players that you're not playing against a scrub from a GC that's barely got there, very lucky. You're playing against people with over 500 challenge cards won, people that have gotten top 10, top 5 finishes in the world, have multiple accomplishments, are some of the best players in the game, and you can still win with this deck. And I was really happy that I ended up selecting this deck and played it throughout the final heat.
Yeah, man, undefeated in the final heat, where, like you said, where mostly just the best play, the best of the best remained, and you weren't lying when some of these guys challenge cards. I saw a few of these guys with 800,000 cards won, crazy. They must be like second or third in the world. They had to have been, because I think iPad Pro Gamer is still #1 at like 900 something. But anyway, yeah, man, insane. And I noticed that you went undefeated with, and wasn't sure if it was this deck or your other minor deck, but when I found out it was this deck, I was like, oh man, I gotta have him on. And plus, so many people request to have you on. So why don't we kind of set the table on this deck here? Obviously, there's a lot of like bait element to it in a way, because you have both minions and minion horde, and you have the witch or the night witch who spawns her bats, and you have goblin gang. So tell us a little bit about, maybe let's start with just as a broad conceptual basis on this deck. What are you trying to do here? You know, it's a little bit obvious, but maybe you can give us some tips, just an overview.
So this deck, it's a control and beatdown hybrid, honestly. You have the giant, and then you also have the minor. It's really nice to play a deck like this, and I really like playing decks that have a beatdown element and then also a minor, specifically because if you play a beatdown deck and then you don't have your beatdown element at your starting initial hand, they pump up, you kind of just lose the game. Like a lot of situations when you're playing Golem, you can just lose the game because your opponent pumps up and you can't punish. But with this deck, you can either punish with a giant, or you can even fireball the pump, or even go in with a minor. So you always have a great opportunity to, very rarely will you lose a game because of initial starting hand with this deck. And with this deck, I kind of like to just play it slow, play it a little bit passively. Sometimes I'll start off the game with a night witch or a giant if I have a good starting hand, but for the most part, I really like just chilling and waiting to see what my opponent does. And sometimes I'll cycle goblin gang at the start, but for the most part, you don't want to start off the game with a minor plus minion horde, or a minor plus minions, or minor plus goblin gang, because you can really severely get punished. You want to play passively for the opening 15 seconds, look at the initial cards that your opponent drops, whittle down what they could potentially be running, and then adjust your playstyle to accommodate that, because it is a control deck after all. So for example, if your opponent drops down a pump, then I immediately go to think, okay, so this guy could be running Expo Pump, he could be running Golem, or he could be running Three Musketeers. And those are the prevalent archetypes at the moment. And I'm going to be trying to go pressure him. I'm going to be dropping a giant and then a night witch, for example. And then I would, because you drop the giant and the night witch at the start, then they're probably going to respond to that with their elixir. And then you can go in for a minor on the pump, and they won't have the elixir to defend the minor. So your decisions are all molded around what your opponent is doing. That's what control decks do. That's basically the premise of them. And it's nice because even though it is a control deck, still you can apply a ton of pressure because it is a beatdown deck in general.
That's a great point, and you actually answered my next question. But just to reiterate, if your opponent pumps, because let's face it, pumps is like, pumping in the first play is basically what you run into like half of every match almost, right?
Yeah.
So if they pump and you have giant in hand, you're always going to punish at the bridge. Let's say you have giant and minor in hand, like giant, minions, night witch, minor. You're always going to giant punish, and as opposed to send in like, you know, whatever, minions, minor first.
Well, you know, it's 9 elixir, so I don't like to drop it immediately at the bridge. Sometimes I will, but I usually drop it like 1 or 2 tiles back, and then accumulate enough elixir, just enough for that minor. So I'll drop it at 10, then as it's crossing the bridge and they respond to it, then I have enough elixir for a minor. And then I'll probably have enough elixir for a zap as well.
Okay. Yeah,
just
that makes
little
sense.
things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you mentioned too, before we get too into the strategy here, you mentioned that you run the log version and also the zap version. Do you think that folks out there, like if they are more ladder players or more tournament challenge players, do you think that one option would be better than the other, or is it just like what you run into on a more regular basis, bait or other stuff?
If you're running into log bait, don't be afraid to sauce in the log, because this deck definitely destroys Three Musketeers either way. No matter what, this deck, it's very hard to lose the Three Musketeers. So if you have log, it's not too big of an issue.
Okay, cool. And what about Night Witch? If people don't have her, or maybe they want to try this deck on ladder and she's not leveled up, is there like a decent substitution for her in this deck?
I mean, you could try Flying Machine, but I've seen that. I've seen that been going around, and some of my friends have had success with a 12 win or here and there with that type of thing. But I'm not really too big of a fan of the ceiling fan Flying Machine. It's not really my favorite card in the game. I really like the Night Witch because it's more robust, and I feel that it's not as prone to spells.
Okay. All right, so back to the strategy. Okay, so once you kind of ascertain what your opponent is playing in terms of their deck, and let's say they don't pump up for first or whatever, or even if they do, obvious matchups are like Three Musketeers. You're just gonna fireball zap or fireball or whatever, right? But let's say talk about like a not so obvious matchup, maybe like Lava Loon or something. And I think we have a replay against Lava Loon. If I haven't shown it, I will show it. But if your opponent has like or a random deck or whatever, what is your strategy going to be in terms of maybe single elixir versus double elixir time? Are you going to send in the giant and the miner to the same tower? Are you going to split lane push? What is kind of your offensive strategy as you move throughout the match?
So when I'm starting up a push, what I really like to do, if I can afford to do so, I like starting my giant first. Then I like dropping my Night Witch as soon as possible after, if it's safe. The reason I like to start my Night Witch as soon as possible after, and this is a big thing that I don't see a lot of people do, you're accumulating a lot more bats. I think there's a bat timer. The initial bats spawn a little bit slower, and then the initial ones afterwards spawn faster. So if you get rid of that timer and you're spawning more bats and they start to accumulate even more, you're just going to get more value out of the card. So if you can safely determine that you're up elixir and that they're not able to punish you opposite lane, drop the Night Witch right behind that giant. The miner, I really don't like dropping miners blindly. The only time I like dropping my miner is when I'm trying to snipe a princess, an Ewiz, archers, something that is valuable that my opponent's trying to defend with, especially executioners. Though that card, you got to make sure that you save your miner for. Every single time they have an executioner, try to fireball and go in with a miner, and you can win the game very often by just doing that. You want to go for a fireball, and then you also want to go for a miner on top of that. And then they NATO, but then their executioner's dead, so they kind of just lose the game.
Nice. And I imagine it's the same thing against one of the more difficult matchups. If you're not running log against bait, are you basically saving that miner for the princess?
Yeah. It's a little bit harder, but you need to make sure that miner connects on top of the princess. If you don't and they stack princesses, you will lose the game. It's kind of difficult, that matchup, if you don't have log. But that's one of the only weaknesses with this deck, in my opinion.
And this is maybe a stupid question, but you're the miner pro, whatever. So when you're sending in a miner to assassinate a princess, is there like any rhyme or reason to like where you're kind of putting your miner? Like, are you predicting where the princess is going to go? Are you sending him maybe a little bit closer to the tower where your opponent might not be blocking it, or is it just kind of your guess is as good as anybody's?
I think the biggest thing is to make sure that you're mixing up your miner placements, right? If you always drop it in front of the princess, I mean, you don't want to have any common trends that your opponent can pick up on. Continuously drop your miner in front of the princess, and they're dropping like a knight in front. It's going to be a big issue if they end up catching it. So you got to switch it up, going left, right, back, and then in front of it. You got to make sure that you're never going to the same spot.
Okay, let's rewind a little bit to before I kind of interrupted you there on the perfect push, right? So you said the giant in the back of the king tower, and then the Night Witch like right on top of him. Then what are you gonna do?
So I really don't like dropping my minion horde or minions unless I know that my opponent actually doesn't have a spell. So what I like to do is, that's a pretty substantial push. That's 9 elixir coming at your opponent, and then the bats are going to be accumulating. So at that point, your opponent probably is going to push a little bit opposite lane. You'll have elixir to defend. Don't be afraid to eat too much. Don't be afraid to eat damage, essentially. And what I like to do is I really like to save the miner and fireball combination, because a lot of times your opponent are going to be rocking executioners. They're going to have something to deal with that push. And if they end up pre-poisoning a Night Witch and a giant, the Night Witch isn't going to die, first off. And then you have so many other units that you can even push opposite lane with. If they go for a pre-poison, I mean, if they have zap, I'll go for like Goblin Gang, miner opposite lane sometimes. It's really situational. Because you have so many cards that are prone to poison and zap and poison and zap, you can really divide up your pushes if your opponent overcommits to defending that big push initially. It's hard to say that there's a killer push with this deck, because it's really, as I said, it is a control deck in essence, and you're really responding to what your opponent's doing.
Okay. Against hog decks, how are you what is your philosophy there? Are you just basically using Goblin Gang / minions or whatever? to defend?
Yeah. So what I like to do is I like to hold, like if you're running mini P.E.K.K.A or Night Witch, I like to hold it down when I know that my opponent's going to be dropping a Hog Rider, and it denies more hits if you actually just hold it down and then let go of it immediately. Have you seen that?
No, I
Like
don't follow. So are you like
okay.
hovering it? You mean?
You're hovering it and waiting for them to place it, and then the Hog Rider sometimes doesn't even get a single hit.
Okay, and are you placing it
But
like
the big,
in the middle
yeah,
of the lane or towards the bridge or more towards the tower?
yeah, in the middle of the lane.
Okay.
But the biggest thing for me is, if you were watching the Hog Rider game, I don't know if you're watching it yet, but I always kept track of when the dude had log. When he had log, I dropped minions, and then he wasted his log, and then he got punished because then I had Goblin Gang, and he wasn't able to win the game after that. It's the same thing against log bait. You never want to always use Goblin Gang against Goblin Barrel because they can go in for pre-log and punish you.
Okay.
You always want to switch up your counters. You never want to be too predictable.
Okay, cool. I mean, that makes perfect sense. And that's something that, we always have to remind, players at home watching is that, a lot of this game is like what you're thinking about, what you're keeping track of, what you're choosing to keep track of your opponent. So like that makes a lot of sense. Obviously, if you know they're running hog log, you make sure you save your minions or you're not using your Goblin Gang when they have the log in hand. Let's do a play-by-play against Poncho because he had like tons of splash damage against you, and he had a P.E.K.K.A for your giant. So I want to see how you handle this match. Do you want to go into the game?
Yeah, sounds solid, man. Get into it.
Sweet. Let me know when you're ready.
All right, I'm into it.
All right, 3, 2, 1, play. All right, so kind of a weird starting hand for you, right?
Yeah, it's still a decent starting hand because I do have Goblin Gang, but I don't have Giant, and then I also don't have Miner. So if he pumps up, I would have to Fireball it. Not usually the thing that I would want to do.
Yeah, but at least you do have like a third option for a pump if you have to.
Yeah. So I don't automatically lose the game, right?
Exactly,
if I didn't have Fireball, you lose the game right there.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's going to give me some very nice. Yeah, a lot of Fireball value right there. Could have elected to zap, but I just didn't want to overcommit. And we're just seeing what he's doing. He's dropping a lot of units right now.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So then you zap.
Yeah, I zapped there. So those minions are going to die. They're not really going to do too much here. So I actually end up having to drop my Night Witch. Not going to counter push with the Miner right there because the Miner would just be too much of an overcommittal. I see a lot of people. One of the biggest mistakes with this deck is when you're down Elixir and then you counter push with the Miner. You can lose the game so many times by doing that because the Miner can be ignored. It's going to do a stagnant 500 damage. It's not too much. And if they ignore that and then they get a huge Elixir advantage, say you were at 3, they were at 3, they drop a Hog Rider, now you're at 1 Elixir. You can't really defend a Hog Rider a lot of times with 1 Elixir, especially if you're going to be dropping Goblins and then they pre-log or something because they'll have enough Elixir for that. So I really don't like overcommitting with miners, and that's one of the biggest things that I see new players do with any type of miner deck. They're like, okay, so I defended this Hog Rider with Spear Goblins, so now I have to, or Goblin Gang, so now I have to counter push with it.
Yeah, I might be guilty of that sometimes when I play miner decks. But you're right. It's like your first inclination is wow, I defended. Oh, look at this. Wow, look at that kite job.
Yeah, so that's one of the biggest things with this deck.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
It's really hard to break through a P.E.K.K.A, but if you start a Giant in the back, and then you have Miner, you can do that placement, pull the P.E.K.K.A to the opposite lane, draw it, or then just deal with it with a Minion Horde or a Goblin Gang, and you're just going to be chilling then.
Wow. And yeah, the Giant's going to probably take that tower almost at least.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's totally spamming you in the other lane, but you're actually stopped. I mean, you're going to take a little bit of damage, but certainly not as much as you gave him on the other side.
Yeah, and I waited with the minions too. I made sure to not allow the princess to lock onto that. That's one of the things with this deck. It feels very clunky when you're initially starting to play it, but you have to realize sometimes you're going to have to eat damage from the splash units, whether it's a wizard or or princess. Sometimes it has to lock onto your tower because you don't want to eat those or allow your minions to eat that damage unnecessarily.
And how much damage are you comfortable taking? I know that's like such a kind of a tough question to answer depending on the deck and stuff, but like
I'm
will
definitely
you lose a tower?
Well, I meant like a princess shot or two on my tower, right? Like I'm definitely comfortable taking that just to preserve HP on my minions.
Okay. Well, let me give you another example. Like, let's say there's a Mega Minion unchecked full health coming down your lane, but maybe you have like a 1 Elixir negative. You're down 1 elixir. Are you comfortable just not defending that if it's a full tower and just using that to recoup your elixir?
In a lot of situations, I think that's definitely the play. No matter what deck you're running, you
Okay.
never really want to overcommit on defense, because if you overcommit on defense, they get an elixir advantage. They can actually capitalize that elixir advantage into taking out your entire tower. So better safe than sorry in a lot of circumstances. I'm sure if anyone was watching ESWC, Surgical Goblin against Azilius, he's ended up losing that match, but he actually ate a entire Electro Wizard on his tower because he needed to catch up in elixir.
Mm-hmm.
If you're not caught up in elixir in a lot of circumstances, you're just going to lose the game.
Yeah, it's a good point. It
Yeah.
is something that I remember. Like, I made that mistake too at King's Cup. Like, I used the Ice Golem for no reason against a Mega Minion, and as soon as I did it, I was like, why did I do that? But I think it's just your natural tendency is just like, I don't want this. I don't want to take damage. But yeah, it's so smart to regain that elixir advantage, especially if you're down. Like, and they're going after your opposite tower. But Tag. We love your YouTube channel. Everybody out there who's watching right now should have already been subscribed, but if you're not, make sure you subscribe in the description below. I'll also put it as the pinned comment. And my fellow Nova content creator, tell us what is going on your channel. What's coming up? I think there's something really good coming, right?
Yeah, man. So there's going to be a lot. I'm committed to improving the quality of my content from now on. Like, I was actually really inspired by how hard you, OJ, and then Chief Pat worked. I talked to you guys a lot at King's Cup. It was crazy to just talk about like what you guys did on a day-to-day basis. It was amazing for me to hear. So that kind of inspired me to put more time into editing my videos, playing a larger variety of games. So then I'm able to show different type of archetypes. And then of course, the mastering archetype videos that I've been doing, I wasn't as consistent with those, but those got a lot of people like those. When people went up to me in King's Cup and said that they liked my videos, those were the most heavily requested ones. So I'm going to start putting at least 1 or 2 out every month. So that's going to be pretty nice. They take like 10 hours to edit. So it's not the most fun process, but it's definitely, I guess it's worth it. It can be rewarding
too, like even for you, once you put that much time in, people love it so much. So that, man, that's all exciting news. I really want to see your channel absolutely blow up, ending this year and going into 2018. What's on the immediate horizon? Anything that you can tell us, or is it going to be a surprise?
I mean, for my channel, or just for me as a player?
Yeah, like videos that we should keep an eye out for.
Okay. Yeah, so right now I'm going to be saucing out a video on a Hog Rider deck that I've been liking a lot on ladder. It's a substitution to the traditional log bait, because log bait sometimes is harder to level up. I know that Goblin Barrel is a win condition. Sometimes it's very hard to level up as an epic. So if you throw in a Hog Rider in there, I just break down that deck and I talk about how that deck can actually help you out. And it's really interesting, because I think that log bait right now, I think it is probably one of the best defensive decks. And if you change out one of the win conditions, the Goblin Barrel for the Hog Rider, you're just going to have a lot more success on ladder, because I feel like you can easily just get hard countered all the time with log bait right now on ladder, just because your opponent has 3 or 4 spells, since it is so common,
Yeah, I think I've seen that deck, or it might have been like a similar variation, and I totally agree with you. It's a really fun deck to play. I think it was recently #1 in the world too. I forgot who had it. I think it was like Herma or somebody. But yeah, really, really cool deck. So I'm definitely looking forward to that. I'm sure all my viewers will be as well. Man, any shout outs, anything like that before we let you go? It's a pleasure having you on as always, man.
So I'm sure we've shouted out my YouTube a lot. I also stream on Twitch Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, all at 6 p.m. Eastern for around 2 to 3 hours. I really like the community there, and that's probably been one of the most enjoyable things for me in Clash Royale. Huge shout out to you, Ash, and shout out to OJ and Chief Pat for inspiring me to like improve my quality on YouTube. That was pretty awesome. And B-Rad and Jigsaw for always practicing with me leading up to King's Cup. Believe it or not, I actually played 5 to 7 hours a day.
I believe it.
It's a lot. Finally paid off, man.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, it paid off, especially after CCGS. That was rough.
Yeah,
I got third place, and I won a bracket, got third place, and I was like one best of 3 away from $3,500. I ended up losing. I didn't get anything. It was demoralizing. And then coming back to King's Cup, winning $5,000, going undefeated in the bracket. It was amazing. So everyone
We lost
I
Jake.
really appreciate it.
Oh, you're back. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, you can talk. I just lost like the last 5 seconds of you.
Oh no, really?
It's okay. Yeah. But it was the comeback story, and it's a really testament to,
Yeah.
if you lose one thing, you work hard, you can come back, and you can definitely make a name for yourself. Like you guys, yeah, I mean, you did so well. I was so proud. I mean, proud of you, like I'm your dad or something. But I was so proud of you in King's Cup, just like how dominant you were, especially like I said, just going undefeated in the final bracket there was just incredible. So man, keep up the good work.
I played a lot of games and it finally paid off after the CCGS thing. After losing in CCGS, just coming back, practicing with everyone, putting in the work, it finally paid off, and it just felt really good.
Well, congrats, man. Here's to way more success in the future.
Thanks, man.
No problem. So guys, that is going to do it. Again, if we haven't mentioned, check out Jake's YouTube, check out his Twitch, and give him some love. Stay tuned for those that hog video as well as his experience at King's Cup 2. Guys, hope you again enjoy the new overlay in the branding. Another huge shout out to Radical Rosh, one of the best in the game, at Radical Rosh on Twitter. Check out my YouTube partner. You can see the new little or is it this way? The new little banner over there. Shout out to Bren Chong for all he does for me in the community. Guys, thank you so much for watching, and as always, take care, guys.